Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking what is really the ultimate shortcut to geopolitical literacy.
The big one today.
It's huge. We're analyzing a blueprint that outlines a revolutionary, almost shocking concept.
I'd say definitely shocking.
It's about using the massive, immediate, and this is the key, non-negotiable global demand for AI energy as the one single lever to finally unite the African continent.
And that premise, it demands serious attention. It really does.
Yeah.
Because it establishes the sheer gravity of the market forces we're talking about.
This isn't a long-term trend.
No, not at all. This is an immediate, you could say, existential crisis for the trillion-dollar AI sector.
Right.
Artificial intelligence, and I mean the supercomputers, data centers, the huge models run by Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, they require an unbelievable, just an insatiable amount of power.
It just keeps growing.
Exactly. Projections show it doubling, maybe even tripling every few years. The cold truth is that the current global infrastructure, whether you look at the US, Europe, or Asia, is just, it's too stretched.
Too bureaucratic.
Too bureaucratic, too slow. It can't deliver this power at the required scale and, just as importantly, speed.
And that failure, that bottleneck in the West and in Asia, it creates this perfect, unprecedented void. And that void is where Africa steps onto the stage. And it's a fundamental change of role, isn't it? From being a recipient of aid or a source of raw materials
to the indispensable supplier.
Exactly. The sources we have point to Africa's unique, non-replicable advantage. It's not just one thing. It's a whole concentration of assets you just don't find anywhere else.
Right.
You have the land-vast, stable, sun-drenched tracts, perfect for utility-scale solar. You have optimal sunlight all year round. And then, critically, the minerals.
And minerals are key. Cobalt, lithium, copper, manganese, all the things you absolutely need for the servers, for the batteries, for the transmission lines that power AI.
And that's before you even get to the energy potential itself.
Well, that's the other layer. You combine world-class solar resources with, say, the underutilized hydropower in the Congo, or the geothermal potential along the Great Rift. You simply can't replicate that density of assets anywhere else.
Not without hitting immediate walls.
Immediate, insurmountable regulatory or geographical hurdles. So what's fascinating here is that the global AI power crisis, it turns this old idealistic dream of continental unity
into a hard, cold economic necessity.
Precisely.
So our mission in this deep dive is a forensic breakdown. We're looking at a detailed 10-year strategic blueprint. This is basically the operating manual for a proposed United African Federation, or UAF.
And this union, it's built entirely around one thing, maximizing that energy and mineral advantage.
Turning Africa into the solution, the global power plan, not just a participant. We need to get into the strategy, the economics, and the sheer scale of the infrastructure behind this.
Okay, so let's start with the engine, the thing driving this entire project, the AI power crisis.
Why are these AI companies, these tech giants, the most motivated buyers of energy in human history?
Because the blueprint doesn't pull any punches. It says, and I'm quoting here, they need power or they die.
It's that simple.
It's that simple. Their whole business model is based on exponential scaling. If they can't train bigger models, if they can't run more queries, they lose the AI arms race. So the race for compute is actually limited by the race for available wattage.
And that wattage is running out in the usual places.
It is, and fast.
So let's really unpack those global limitations. This is where the leverage comes from. Why can't America and Europe just solve this at home? I mean, we always assume the West can just build its way out of a problem.
Yeah, but not this time. It really comes down to structural bottlenecks. Grid infrastructure, for one, and regulatory friction.
The red tape.
A mountain of it. In the US and Europe, they physically cannot build new transmission grids fast enough to support these massive consolidated power needs of hyperscale data center.
How long are we talking?
Permitting a new major transmission line can often take 7 to 10 years. It crosses multiple states or even countries, and it's constantly held up by litigation. You know, NIMBism.
Not my backyard.
Exactly. Nobody wants a high-voltage line or a massive solar project near them. It slows everything to a crawl. And the AI companies, they need that power now, not in a decade.
And what about Asia? Places like Japan, South Korea, Southeast Asia. They're already stretched, right?
Stretched thin is an understatement. Land is at an incredible premium. And just connecting huge new power projects to their existing grids is incredibly costly and complex. Their infrastructure just wasn't designed for this kind of exponential, hyper-concentrated demand.
Okay, so then the obvious alternative that always comes up is the Middle East. The Gulf states, they have vast empty deserts.
They do, and that's a fair point. But they have some critical deficiencies for this specific type of project. Yes, they have land, but their optimal solar profiles, while good, aren't always better than, say, the Sahara or equatorial regions for year-round output.
But the real hurdle is something else.
It's water. Fresh water. Data centers, especially these high-density AI clusters, need massive, reliable amounts of fresh water for cooling. The cost and the energy needed to desalinate water at that industrial scale. It just makes the whole thing vastly more expensive and less sustainable.
So if you take the West, industrial Asia, and the Gulfs, and they're all functionally out of the running for delivering this at the necessary scale and speed,
then the blueprint's central claim really holds up. Africa emerges as the last solution.
the last remaining region.
The sources are very clear on this. It's the last remaining region where a continental, unified, renewable energy solution is physically and politically possible within the time frame that matters.
And that geographical fact, that non-negotiable reality, that becomes the core of Africa's negotiating strength.
Absolutely. They're not just offering cheap land. They're offering the only viable lifeline for the multi-trillion-dollar global AI industry.
This all gets triggered by what the sources are calling the wake-up moment. This is projected for years 1 and 2 of the plan.
And it doesn't start with some internal political movement. It starts with overwhelming external market pressure.
The tech companies.
Exactly. Global tech companies, driven by this desperation for compute, start simultaneously approaching multiple individual African governments.
And what are they asking for?
Everything. Permission to build vast continental-scale solar fields, rights to construct transmission corridors that have to cross multiple nations, and of course guaranteed long-term access to those critical minerals, the cobalt, the lithium, the copper.
So this simultaneous demand, this sort of coordinated wave of desperation, that's the lightning strike.
That's the catalyst. It forces what the sources call the realization upon African leadership. They look at this pile of desperate requests and they understand 3 critical things.
Okay, what's the first?
First, that the AI companies need Africa. Its land, its sun, its minerals, way more than Africa needs any single one of them.
Yeah.
They hold the unique asset.
And the second realization?
Second, negotiating individually, nation by nation, would just repeat the catastrophic mistakes of the past.
Selling off resources for cheap.
Exactly. Letting foreign companies play one nation against another, driving the price down, externalizing all the profit.
And that leads to the third point, the pivot.
The big one. The realization that negotiating as a single, unified bloc, as a federation, could reshape the continent forever.
You ensure the wealth stays in Africa.
You build African capacity, and you maintain African sovereignty over your most critical infrastructure. This single market-driven realization that AI desperation is Africa's ultimate leverage. That's the argument that forces a political union. So once that market realization really hits home, the next logical step in the blueprint is to institutionalize it.
To make it official.
Right. And the sources detail this happening at the Addis Ababa Emergency Summit. This is where the treaty to form a loose but binding United African Federation, the UAF, gets signed.
And what's crucial here, and the sources stress this, is that this is presented as the logical geopolitical pathway to unity.
It's driven by economic necessity. This isn't some romantic political fantasy. Unity is just the prerequisite to secure the deal. You can't get the $200 billion without it.
And I think the genius of it, or maybe just the most pragmatic part, is the limited federal power defined in the treaty.
Absolutely key. This is how you get buy-in from 54 very different nations. You have to mitigate those fears of some massive centralized bureaucracy just taking over.
So the Federation only focuses on a few key areas.
5 areas only: continental energy policy, trade, a single currency, natural resource policies, specifically for those critical minerals and defense. That's it.
And everything else.
All local matters, education, healthcare, local policing, internal infrastructure, that all remains with the states. It preserves sovereignty.
So existing nations become states with elected governors.
Exactly. They keep their internal self-governance. The fear of dissolving national identity is handled by making sure the federal government only manages what's necessary to execute the AI energy strategy.
Which brings us to the core economic mechanism, the Continental Energy Mandate.
Right. The treaty creates a federal committee with one job and one job only: coordinate a single, unified vision for building the world's largest renewable power network inside Africa.
A network big enough for internal use and for export.
It has to be. big enough to fuel Africa's own industrialization and export massive guaranteed power to the AI companies. Without a single unified grid, you don't have a single negotiating body.
And without that, no deal.
No $200 billion deal. The energy goal is the incentive that forces everyone to get on the same page.
The treaty also enshrines some foundational principles. I mean, it seems designed to prevent history from repeating itself.
It's a direct response to centuries of resource extraction that benefited everyone but Africa. The articles state over and over that only a united Africa can protect its resources from exploitation in this new digital age.
Let's spend a bit of time on Article 7, because this feels like the linchpin. The structure for benefit distribution, this 5-0-2020-10 model.
It's probably the most important insurance policy for the whole union. If that wealth isn't seen as being distributed fairly, the whole thing will just fracture.
Agreed. So how does it break down?
Okay, so 50%, half of the profit from any energy or resource deal, goes directly to the producing state.
The local government.
The local government where the solar field or the mine is actually located. This gives the local governor a huge, immediate incentive to support the federal mandate and to keep things secure on the ground.
Okay, that makes sense. Then the next 20%.
That goes to the federal treasury. This is what funds the core functions of the UAF, the defense force managing the currency, and big continental projects like high-speed rail that link the new industrial hubs.
And then there's the equalization fund.
Right. Another 20% goes into an equalization fund. This is the stabilization mechanism. It's designed to support the less developed states, the ones that might not be resource-rich.
So the wealth from, say, the Sahel's solar farms helps lift the standard of living everywhere.
Exactly. It counters that internal economic disparity, which has always been a major cause of conflict and instability.
And the final 10%.
That is reserved specifically for education and technology development. And it's not discretionary. It's dedicated to building universities, research labs, vocational schools, all focused on AI, engineering, renewable energy.
You're building your own knowledge economy.
You have to. So this 5-0-20-20-10 model, it's carefully balanced. It's designed to guarantee local prosperity, central funding, continental fairness, and future capacity, all at the same time.
But let's play devil's advocate for a second. We're talking about 54 nations. You have major economies like Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa. They have a lot of sovereign power right now.
Sure.
What stops them from just refusing to cede control? They might think they can negotiate a better deal on their own.
And the blueprint's answer to that is that the leverage only exists if they unite. If Nigeria tries to go it alone, the tech companies just pivot to Kenya or Egypt or Zambia. They play them off each other, and Africa's position is fractured. The sheer scale of what's needed, hundreds of gigawatts, is bigger than any single country.
So the unified deal is just exponentially larger.
Exponentially larger and more profitable than anything they could get individually. Plus, the equalization fund and the stable currency, those are huge benefits even for the wealthiest states. It's a risk for sure, but the potential reward, a $10 trillion continental GDP, is what gets them to the table.
Okay, so let's move into the implementation phase. We're in phase 2, years 3 and 4. This is where, the rubber meets the road.
This is where you turn all that demand into concrete, irreversible investment, where you lock in the union's future.
And the sources say the tech giants, now fully aware of this global energy bottleneck, are ready to commit a staggering amount of capital up front.
Over $150 billion for infrastructure development. And this isn't aid. This is a hard-nosed business commitment to build out solar across the Sahel, geothermal in the Rift Valley, expand hydro in the Congo.
They're financing the infrastructure because they need the power.
They have no choice. If they want guaranteed power, they have to help build the plant.
But what's different this time, and this is a critical point, are the 3 conditions for investment. These are dictated by the Federation.
Non-negotiable terms. This is what shifts the balance of power.
What's the first one?
The first is ownership. All power infrastructure must be majority African-owned, at least 51% mandated.
So no foreign corporation can gain sovereign control over the continent's most critical asset.
Exactly. The Federation and its states hold the deciding vote on everything: future expansion, pricing, distribution.
Okay, condition number 2.
Capacity building. All jobs, construction, maintenance, it must use African companies and workers first. This is about rapidly upskilling the workforce.
So the billions flowing in aren't just paying foreign contractors.
Right. You're establishing domestic engineering firms, construction companies, maintenance crews that can run the grid long after the initial build is done.
And the third condition, this one feels very important socially, the keep one unit rule.
This is a huge one. It basically says that excess energy must be prioritized for African homes and industry. The rule is explicit. For every unit of power you sell to a foreign data center, Africa keeps 1 unit for its own internal grid.
So the boom directly benefits citizens. It ends blackouts, it fuels local industry.
And crucially, it acts as a shield. It insulates African consumers from global AI price spikes. Domestic power costs stay stable and low, no matter how desperate the global market gets.
Now, to manage this huge inflow of capital and the financing, the Federation introduces the Afro digital currency. Why digital first?
For speed and volume, mainly. And to minimize corruption through traceable ledgers, it just streamlines continental trade, and you avoid the volatility of all the different national currencies.
But what makes it stable?
It's what backs it. This isn't just code. The Afro is backed by tangible, real-world assets.
Gold, cobalt, lithium.
And most importantly, those long-term 50-year energy contracts with the tech giants. These are guaranteed revenue streams. So the currency is essentially backed by future guaranteed wattage. That's what makes it so stable and predictable.
And while all that financial plumbing is being installed, the physical work starts on the African power belt.
We're talking about a construction project on the scale of the U.S. interstate system. A massive, high-voltage, cross-continental grid.
Linking everything together.
Linking the Congo hydro to the Sahara solar, to the Kenya geothermal, to storage hubs in southern Africa. This unified grid isn't just for export. It's the essential backbone for Africa's own industrial revolution.
Which brings us to Phase 3, years 5 and 6. The boom in the shield.
Right. Data centers start popping up everywhere because the power is not just cheap, it's guaranteed stable by these long-term contracts. This is the moment of peak global tech dependence on Africa.
But even then, the Federation enforces another rule: compute ownership.
This is brilliant. The sources are very clear. Africa supplies the power, yes, but Africa owns part of the compute capacity that's built on its soil.
What does that mean in practice?
It means a percentage of the processing power in every single data center is reserved for African use, for African scientific research, for African startups, for African-owned AI models.
So you shift from being a service station to being a producer.
A producer of technological output. This leads to the first African-owned AI supercomputers run by African engineers using their own data.
And finally, you have to protect all of this. The African Defense Force, or ADF.
It becomes a necessity. When you have billions of dollars of critical infrastructure, the lifeblood of the global AI economy spread across 54 states, you need a unified command.
And its role is very specific.
Strictly defined. Protect energy corridors. Block illegal mining that could destabilize the supply chain. Safeguard data centers. Secure trade routes. Power, stability, compute, that's the new gold. And it needs a federal security apparatus to protect it.
All right, let's pivot to the financial architecture. This is probably the most intricate part of the blueprint.
It has to be.
The sources lay out this really detailed, multi-pronged strategy for securing that first $200 billion, the seed capital you need to make this all real.
And it all starts with part 1, creating the investment structure. The key idea here is that clarity is value. Before any major fund is going to commit a dime, Africa has to systematically de-risk the project.
How do they do that?
It starts with something called the African Energy Stabilization Framework. Think of it as the continental legal architecture. It guarantees contract enforcement across all 54 states.
So a contract signed in Kenya is just as valid in Nigeria.
With the exact same legal authority. It also creates a single, unified tariff structure for the energy sales, and it formalizes that 50-20-20 pen profit split. It turns a potential labyrinth of 54 different legal codes into one predictable framework.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's next?
Next is the Continental Power Authority. This is the single negotiating body. This eliminates the #1 headache for global investors, which is negotiating country by country.
So one point of contact.
One point of contact. This authority controls all the licensing, the right-of-way for transmission lines, mineral allocation, environmental approvals. The sources say this makes the deal 10 times easier and faster to close.
And that speed is what the AI companies want.
Desperately. And then you round out the structure with the African Compute and Energy Bank, or ACE.
The financial hub.
Exactly. It handles the huge loans, the financing, and most importantly, the investor guarantees. And its initial seed capital comes from pooling existing African sovereign wealth funds and development banks. It shows Africa is investing in itself first.
So with that whole sophisticated structure in place, the Federation moves to part two, targeting 4 categories of investors.
And they target the 200 billion by understanding the unique motivations of different capital pools. It's a very targeted approach.
Group A is the AI companies themselves, Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA.
They're Group A because they're driven by pure necessity. They are the anchor investors. The target is $100 billion from them, mostly as prepaid long-term power purchase agreements.
That guarantees them power and gives the Federation immediate cash.
Exactly. Then you have Group B, the sovereign wealth funds. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Norway, Singapore.
They're looking for something different.
They want stable, low-risk, 20 to 30-year returns from clean energy. They love the security of having both the physical assets, the minerals, and the guaranteed revenue from the AI contracts. The target there is $60 billion.
Okay, Group C, the global infrastructure funds. BlackRock, Brookfield.
These funds want to own assets that generate strong cash flow, and they're turning to Africa because gridlock and land scarcity mean they just can't build these hyperscale projects in America or Europe anymore. Africa is their new frontier. The target is $30 billion.
And finally, Group D is internal African wealth.
A smaller slice, about $10 billion, but it's crucial politically. African pension funds, banks, existing state energy companies. It ensures the project has domestic buy-in and isn't seen as purely foreign-backed.
So that's the who. Let's talk about the how. Part 3, offering irresistible structures.
Right. Africa doesn't just ask for money. It offers financial instruments that are tailored to what these investors desperately need.
Like the 50-year power purchase agreements for the AI firms.
That's the flagship offer. It's critical. The AI firms don't want to operate power plants. They just want guaranteed output and predictable, stable prices for half a century. That rock-solid guarantee is what unlocks the first $100 billion.
Then you have the African energy bonds from ACE.
And these are not standard government bonds. They are backed by real physical assets, the cobalt, the lithium, and by the predictable revenue from those 50-year AI contracts. That dual backing makes them incredibly attractive to risk-averse investors. That's another $50 billion.
And the final piece is joint venture ownership of the data centers themselves.
Right. Foreign companies bring the tech and the servers. Africa brings the land, the power, and the stability. But through the Federation, Africa retains guaranteed majority ownership. This unlocks the last 30 to 40 billion and ensures that technology transfer is tied directly to equity. So once the financial architecture is set and the capital is lined up, the Federation moves into the negotiation phase. And the core principle here is maintaining the African position of power.
Which means negotiating as one block. No side deals.
Absolutely non-negotiable. Africa negotiates as a federation, a unified, powerful front.
And the key tactic, according to the blueprint, is to use competition between the investors themselves.
You invite everyone into the same room. The US, China, Saudi Arabia, European firms, all the big AI companies.
Right.
The sheer fear of missing out on the only viable large-scale energy solution forces them to accept Africa's terms.
Because if they don't, a competitor will.
And that competitor will have guaranteed power for decades. Africa's greatest weapon here is speed. The Continental Power Authority can fast-track projects faster than anyone in the West. Investors who accept the tough terms get rewarded with immediate regulatory certainty. That's invaluable in the AI race.
And this strength is used to enforce what the blueprint calls the 6 essential conditions for long-term value.
These are designed specifically to avoid the mistakes of the past. The first one is simple but fundamental. African companies first. Mandating African workers, contractors, engineers to build everything.
Building internal capacity from day one.
Day one. The second condition is huge. Force local value addition. This changes the entire supply chain.
So no more just exporting raw minerals.
Exactly. Raw cobalt, lithium, copper. It must be processed and refined in Africa first before it's exported. You build the smelters, the refineries, the chemical plants locally. That doubles or triples the value you capture.
And it forces the creation of battery and server component plants on the continent.
Immediately. Third is mandatory technology transfer. AI companies have to commit to training African engineers, building African research centers, and hosting African-owned AI models on the infrastructure they're building.
You're not just the power plug for foreign tech.
You're guaranteeing the next generation of African innovators is trained on the best systems in the world.
Number 4 is the ownership of compute, which we touched on.
Right. You're not just selling watts. You're securing a percentage of the compute capacity itself. When Google's data center runs on your power, a piece of that digital output belongs to the Federation. It creates this massive recurring digital revenue stream.
Fifth is the long-term price lock.
This is a two-way street. The Federation locks in stable, long-term prices for the foreign firms to guarantee their investment. But, and this is critical, it also guarantees permanently discounted, stable rates for African consumers and industries.
Insulating the local market from global AI demand.
Exactly. And finally, condition 6, sovereignty protection. This is for internal stability, a firm refusal of any private armies, private security zones, or corporate-controlled territories.
All operations are under Federation law, with security provided by the ADF.
It reinforces that Africa is in control of its land, its resources, and its own security.
So as we get into the back half of the decade, the infrastructure is built and running. We're now in phase 4, years 7 and 8, industrialization and knowledge.
And this is where the continent's entire economic identity is, irrevocably changed.
The industrial shift.
It's profound and it's immediate. With abundant, cheap, guaranteed clean power from the power belt, Africa becomes the cheapest place on Earth for energy-intensive manufacturing.
We're talking about things like green hydrogen.
Green hydrogen, server hosting, high-capacity battery production, which is now possible because of the local mineral processing and heavy industries like steel and aluminum.
Things that need huge amounts of steady power.
Exactly. So factories start relocating from high-cost, power-constrained places in Europe and Asia, and they move directly into Africa, following the lowest cost of energy.
And that industrial boom fuels the knowledge boom.
It does. That 10% revenue slice for education funds a massive rebuild and expansion of universities and vocational schools. You get this huge talent boom in engineering, AI, energy management.
Which sparks the diaspora boom.
The return wave. Engineers, doctors, academics, entrepreneurs who had moved to Europe or America, they start coming home. And not for charity. They're coming home for opportunity, because Africa is now the world's fastest growing, most technologically promising economic region.
And by phase 5, years 9 and 10, the UAF hits what the blueprint calls superpower status.
It starts with the Afro digital currency reaching maturity. It completely replaces national currencies for trade and banking. And because it's backed by commodities and those energy contracts, inflation stabilizes. You get a reliable financial environment for decades.
And economically, Africa becomes the world's power plant.
The continent solidifies its position as the largest energy exporter on the planet, supplying clean energy to Europe, the Middle East, Asia, but most importantly, powering its own massive integrated internal industry. The output is now measured in terawatts. It's a scale nobody else can match.
And that bet on compute ownership pays off.
Exponentially. Africa starts selling compute services globally. It's producing its own AI supercomputers, hosting its own cloud infrastructure, developing its own large language models that are tailored to its own cultures.
Narrative completely flips.
Completely. Africa stops being just a consumer of technology and a supplier of raw materials. It becomes a global producer of energy, of compute, and of complex industrial goods.
And so the ultimate goal of unity is achieved through this irreversible economic integration.
Africa now speaks as a unified bloc on the world stage. It's negotiating contracts, it's rebalancing old mining rights, and it secures its place as the undeniable third global power, right alongside the US and China.
The world has to talk to Africa.
It has to, because the global AI economy, the new engine of civilization, cannot function without African resources, African power, and African stability. The sources estimate, and this is conservative, that the total GDP of the UAF could realistically cross the $10 trillion mark by the end of this decade. That fundamentally shifts the global economic balance of power. #tag outro. When you look at it all, this entire 10-year blueprint, it's a spectacular exercise in turning a global crisis into a continental opportunity.
The core strategy is unity, but it's a unity that's achieved not through idealism, but through hard-nosed economic reality.
Right. It's because the global AI companies require African sunlight, African land, African minerals, and crucially stable, unified governance more urgently than anything else on Earth.
And the outcome is this profound, permanent shift in economic identity. Africa transitions from being a net resource exporter to a producer of energy, compute, complex goods. It achieves economic sovereignty by capitalizing on the world's most urgent technical need.
Now, the blueprint is visionary, but it's not naive. It acknowledges the massive challenges. You have deeply entrenched nationalism, regional rivalries, and of course, the ever-present threat of corruption trying to siphon off this incredible wealth.
So the success of this whole thing, this massive undertaking, it really relies on 3 foundational pillars: surviving the political turbulence of that first decade.
The first is governor's autonomy. You have to ensure the states keep enough local control and prosperity through that 5-20-20-10 split. You can't let power become too concentrated at the federal level.
Second is transparency by design. The sources really stress this. Every federal budget, every contract, every expenditure of that equalization fund has to be public, tracked on a blockchain, and audited in real time.
You have to combat corruption before it can take root and destroy investor confidence.
And the third pillar is economic fairness. That equalization fund must be protected. It has to be used to make sure that the resource-rich states support the less developed ones. That's what stabilizes the union against jealousy and disparity.
If those three pillars, decentralized power, public transparency, and economic fairness, if they can hold true, then the United African Federation moves from a blueprint to a global reality.
And that's the question we leave you with. Can the irreversible existential necessity of global AI demand finally overcome the historical challenges of continental politics?